There's a strange thing about real security. The most effective methods rarely look dramatic, and they're almost never the ones sold in shiny packaging. During the World War II, families on nearly every front were forced to defend their homes with whatever they had on hand. The threat wasn't only air raids or shortages, it was the simple reality that so many men were away fighting that homes, farms and village storefronts were easier targets for break-ins. Yet, despite that vulnerability, burglary rates in many rural areas stayed surprisingly low. People didn't rely on high fences, high-tech alarms, or heavy steel locks. What they relied on was a single, surprisingly simple psychological tactic that security experts still recommend today, because it works better than most modern strategies, and honestly, because intruders fear uncertainty more than anything else. Let's start this with a proper hook. If you had to protect your home tonight with no alarm system, no dog, no cameras, and no neighbours around, what would you do? Most people, go straight to improvised weapons or makeshift traps, but that's not where the people of the 1940s put their energy. They focused on shaping the intruder's perception before he ever reached the door. The first minute a potential burglar spends evaluating a house determines whether he tries his luck or moves on. World War II families understood this instinctively, and they used it to stop strangers long before anyone touched a doorknob. This is the forgotten move that kept countless homes safe during those uncertain years, and honestly, it still outwits modern burglars in a way few people expect. So, the method worked by convincing intruders the house was being watched. In wartime, Britain, France and parts of Eastern Europe, most families didn't really have the luxury of leaving a home looking empty. Blackouts, factory shifts and ration line schedules often left entire streets dark and quiet. The risk of break-ins rose sharply, especially in towns where evacuees had left homes behind. To counter this, households adopted a subtle practice that spread quickly once people saw just how well it worked. They created unmistakable but harmless signs that someone inside was awake, alert, and paying close attention to the noise outside. The most common version involved setting a small item, usually something lightweight and noisy, directly behind the main door, not to injure or trap, but to act as an early warning signal. If the door moved even a fraction, the item fell or shifted loudly enough to alert the occupants. But here's the key. Intruders often spotted these items before they ever touched the door. A broom leaning against the inside frame, a tin cup placed where it was visible through the thin gap between door and jamb, a piece of coal resting against the threshold. None of these could harm anyone. Yet each one sent an unmistakable message that someone inside was vigilant, light sleeping, and expecting trouble. Burglars avoided houses with those visible markers because they suggested a homeowner who'd react quickly. Modern burglars react the same way, even with today's technology. Security studies repeatedly show that burglars don't fear locks. They fear waking someone. When a home offers the slightest hint that the occupants have set up noise-making indicators, most trespassers walk away immediately. Even if the homeowner isn't actually awake, the intruder doesn't know that. World War II families mastered this psychological leverage long before motion detector lights or smart alarms existed, and it remains effective precisely because it feels personal rather than mechanical. A person can ignore a camera, but not the thought of a homeowner already listening from the other side of the door. You know, you can actually apply this method today with simple practical setups. The modern version doesn't rely on old wartime scraps, but, well, the principle is identical. Just present clear, visible signs that any entry attempt will make noise. One of the simplest ways to do this is to place a lightweight, easily toppled object just inside the door where it can be glimpsed from outside. Something as ordinary as an empty metal can leaning against the door, or a walking stick balanced where a small movement will knock it over. Well, that recreates the same psychological effect as the World War II setups. You're not building a booby trap. You're signalling that the house is active, alert, and unpredictable. Homeowners often underestimate how easy it is for a trespasser to choose a different target. If they approach a house and spot an unpredictable noisemaker inside the entryway, they understand that the homeowner has thought about security in a personal, proactive way. During World War II, burglars learned quickly that such homes were usually occupied by stubborn people who didn't sleep deeply and who would confront them immediately. Today's burglars, even with gloves and quiet tools, still avoid homes with any signs of deliberate monitoring. Another practical example is the door floor indicator. Many World War II households placed a short piece of firewood or a large spoon directly inside the threshold. If someone tried to push the door inward, the object scraped audibly across the wooden boards. Through the blackout curtains and ration-era silence, that tiny noise was enough to wake a sleeping family. You know, you can adapt the same idea today by just leaning a long umbrella or, say, a staff against the inner door frame. If that door moves, it'll fall against the floor with a sound that's, well, unmistakable to anyone inside. There's really no danger involved, no illegality at all, just prevention based on, well, good old-fashioned awareness. This lost World War II trick survives because it doesn't try to fight intruders. It simply convinces them to leave. The reason this method remains relevant is simple. World War II families didn't rely on strength or confrontation. They relied on deterrence rooted in human behavior. They understood that if you create even the slightest doubt in a trespasser's mind, he chooses an easier house every single time. No technology has replaced that, and no camera can recreate the psychological discomfort of knowing a homeowner may already be standing behind the door. If you found this guide valuable, make sure you subscribe to the channel and share it with someone who enjoys practical history as much as you do. These forgotten lessons aren't just stories. They're tools worth keeping alive. Backyard wisdom.